Hey, what's up, everybody? So, what's life without a little controversy? Let's talk about Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham and the WNBA and what's going on here. So, everybody at this point knows Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark are WNBA players. Well, the Indiana Fever, went out and got Sophie Cunningham from the Phoenix Mercury as an enforcer to protect Caitlin Clark because she broke 29 league records as a rookie. She's really good, and players are fouling the heck out of her. They're gouging her eyes, they're throat slamming her, they're throwing her to the ground, and nothing's being done about it. It's outside of the rules. The officials are not doing their jobs. They're just letting it happen. Well, I will say one thing. In the 80s and the 90s, us NBA hardcore fans, we loved the physicality, but there has to be fairness. Look at me. Like, I played recreational basketball for over 20 years, and I'm 5'5" and between a buck 20 and a buck 30. And when you play good, you're shattering the ego of these other guys. I've had three things happen to me over the years where I've got a scar permanently on my chin from somebody who got pissed off at how good I was playing. We were going for a loose ball, and he jumps his whole body weight on my head, and my head reverberates off the hardwood, putting a scar right here. Of course, at the time, I acted like it didn't hurt, but you shouldn't be doing things like that. Another time, I had a guy, I was playing defense too aggressively and too close on him, and he put his elbow like this to try to back me up. He was wearing an elbow sleeve, and I don't know if you can see it, but right up in here, half my eyebrow was gone. It never grew back thickly because, I had an injury that was up and sideways, and the girl working the front desk was going for a nursing program in college, and she said she'd never seen it before, where an injury went up and sideways, and I had blood all over the floor. That's not fair. That we shouldn't be playing bully ball like that. And in the WNBA, it's happening, and nothing's being done about it. Caitlin Clark is pissed, and I don't blame her one bit. Now, you're seeing some videos of artificial intelligence. It's not really what Caitlin Clark said. These videos are using her voice, and they're saying, oh, if they ban Sophie Cunningham for standing up for me, then I'm out. I'm going to go to Europe. Well, she didn't really say that. That's AI, and AI is the downfall of humanity. But Sophie Cunningham did pull the hair of this J.C. Walters of, I think it was the San Antonio Silver Stars, and their head coach, Becky Hammon, is playing both sides of the fence. And it's really upsetting me because she's saying, well, Caitlin Clark is just so good, you can't play her normal, that you have to play her aggressively. But she supports Sophie Cunningham for standing up for her player, her teammate. Well, you can't play it both ways. So if you're going to support Sophie Cunningham for standing up for her teammate, then pull your dogs back and tell them to not foul really hard like that, because the league is allowing Caitlin Clark to get her eyes gouged and to be throat slammed and knocked on the ground, and the officials aren't blowing the whistle, and that's not right. Coming from a guy who had this happen to him for years, several times throughout the years. I know in Germany, when I went and played recreational basketball up there was this 300-pound guy named Kane. I'm 130 pounds at most. I'm going for a game-winning layup, and this guy elbows me in the back so hard it takes the wind right out of my body. I missed the game-winning layup. There's not an official with stripes to blow the whistle, and nobody even acknowledged it. And I said, that's not fair. I stopped the game. I said, well, you're going to sit there and do this to me on a game-winning layup, and you guys act like nothing happened? Like, this isn't it's not fun for us to go out and play basketball against people who do that, and they do it everywhere. The game has been compromised and ruined. It's not what it used to be. So nobody wants to see this happen in the WNBA. And we've got another controversy in the NBA. I'm going to be that whiny Pacers fan that says if two things didn't happen, Tyrese Halliburton didn't tear his Achilles, which I fully supported him playing, and I would say play again if we were in that situation. I knew in Game 5 when he had the strained calf that he was probably going to tear the Achilles because it happened to Damian Lillard, happened to Jason Tatum, happened to Kevin Durant a few years ago, it happened to Klay Thompson a few years ago, and now you guys are seeing it in baseball with Griffin Canning. He tore his Achilles last night. I don't understand why we're seeing this happen all the time, just in this short amount of time, but we are. But you only get a chance to play for finals one time. And I'm sorry, you put everything on the line, and you have to respect Tyrese Halliburton for doing that. The other thing, reason I think the Pacers lost in the finals was because of this official by the name of Scott Foster. They're calling him the extender, and he is extending series. And you ask, what do you mean? Well, in games he's officiated, Oklahoma City was 4-0 in the playoffs, and you can say, well, they're the best team. They won the most games. It's just coincidental they happened to win when he was officiating. But if you go back and look over his track record, there are players who have gone public against Scott Foster over the years, especially in the playoffs, and said he's not calling the game right. It's not fair, especially Chris Paul, who is like 2-11 in playoff games officiated by Scott Foster, who is called the extender. And the fact that the NBA won't investigate this, the fact that they won't fire him, the fact that they won't look into it, there's more to it. He used to be still is friends with a guy by the name of Tim Donaghy, who was involved in the NBA's betting scandal. And if you guys remember back then, you NBA fans who happen to be watching this video, the NBA didn't come out right away and address that issue of him betting on games. It percolated for a little bit. And due to public outrage and sentiment against the league, they finally did what they had to do. And I think that's what we're going to see with the WNBA and Caitlin Clark's situation. They're finally going to take a stance one way or another because they're going to lose money. And I always say the players hold the power, and us, like the regular people of corporations and stuff. This is why, say, for when I was working at Save A Lot last year, I was a key holder making $11 an hour. And I was like, look, y'all ain't paying me enough money. I was like, this isn't worth the waste of my time. I'm sorry. If you can't compete with the big boys, well, then you don't deserve to be a company, but you need to start treating people right. Well, it's the same thing with the WNBA. They're not paying their players very much. They're making all this money and endorsement money off of Caitlin Clark and players like Sophie Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham's hot. You've got men interested in women's sports again, women's basketball. Instead of just watching a bunch of lesbians throw elbows at each other and the foul's not getting called, men don't really want to see that. But they'll watch Sophie Cunningham. They'll watch Caitlin Clark because she's great. She's like Stephen Curry. She's the Stephen Curry of women's basketball. Could she, I always posited that maybe we just scrap women's sports altogether and integrate it with the men's and have the very best women play in the men's leagues. Maybe Caitlin Clark maybe she'd be a 6th or 7th man on the bench or something. But could she guard an NBA player? Probably not. Is she better than Andrew Nembhard, shooting guard of the Pacers? Probably overall, at least on offense. Now, you got to factor defense in there, and the answer is probably not. Did Andrew Nembhard really contain Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? No, he didn't. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Oklahoma City Thunder went on to win MVP at the finals. So it's not like Andrew Nembhard mitigated him. So you can make the argument maybe Caitlin Clark's better than Andrew Nembhard if we were to consolidate the leagues. But it's probably more of a conversation for another day. But nobody wants to see what's going on right now in the WNBA. But props to Sophie Cunningham. I fully support what she's doing. Let's stop this stuff right now. Kudos to the Indiana Fever for going out and getting their enforcer. If you hardcore NBA fans remember when Reggie Miller played for the Pacers, he had Antonio Davis and Dale Davis as his enforcers. Reggie Miller was this goofy, gangly shooting guard who was awesome at what he did, but that's why Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant got in fights with him, because he was better than they expected him to be. He was so good, it really angered them. I've seen it. I've been there. When I'm having a good game and I'm on and I'm hitting my shots and I'm getting under their skin and playing great defense, they get pissed at me too. It happens. But what happened to good sportsmanship? You used to see those posters in elementary school and high school, helping the other opposing player up off the floor, pulling him up. Why don't we see that in the WNBA anymore? It's because the WNBA is corrupt. We're going to have to force them to take a stance. Don't buy the jerseys. Don't go to the games. I said the same thing for the NBA. If they do nothing about Scott Foster, if they act like this is nothing, stop going to the games. Those Pacers tickets for the finals, guys, they were $1,000 a pop for the nosebleed seats. $1,000. I couldn't afford it. If it was $500, I would have thought about it. That's still too high for my blood, but I certainly can't afford $1,000 for one person to go sit up in a nosebleed. 3 or 4 years ago, that same ticket was $5 in a regular season game, and you would have hardly nobody sitting beside you. They couldn't give those seats away. But now they were selling them for $1,000 because Pacers fans were starved. They hadn't made the finals in 25 years. So that's some food for thought. What's life without a little controversy? And as always, until next time, Godspeed, everybody.